Hello everybody. So this is now the last lecture in this small series. So today I will add a few words about the graphing system, and then I'll discuss interesting physics, well I think so, in the case of even denominator fractions. And I will spend some time introducing yet another new wave function, which is called the Pfaffian wave function. Okay, so last time we briefly discussed the Landau levels of monolayer graphene. These are displayed in this figure, in which you see that as a function of the magnetic field, you have a set of levels that are evolving as b squared, and then there is an orbital set of Landau levels which stays at zero energy all the time. So that's a peculiarity of monolayer graphene. And this picture happens in two copies because there is one set of Landau level for each valley, which means that each of these states is in fact fourfold degenerate, in the sense that there are two copies corresponding to the two valleys, and then there is of course the physical spin of the electron. So if the Zeeman energy is small or even zero, then there is an exact spin degeneracy. And I briefly mentioned that if you look at the Coulomb interaction between the electrons, in addition to the obvious SU2 spin symmetry, there is also an SU2 symmetry between the valleys. And in fact, there is an even larger symmetry. You can make unitary rotations in the 4D space spanned by valley and spin degrees of freedom. So in fact, the Coulomb interaction has even a larger SU4 symmetry. This SU4 symmetry of the Coulomb interaction is broken down to a subgroup in real graphene. Of course, there is the Zeeman effect that breaks the spin symmetry in the usual sense. But then there are also small anisotropies due to lattice scale spacing that also break this SU4 symmetry. This is something which is not fully understood quantitatively, but we know that it lifts the degeneracy. So I will tell you a few words about that. So it means that if you want to fill the Landau levels, you have to take into account this fourfold degeneracy. So this is the set of Landau levels at fixed value of the magnetic field. So this is the energy. That's the central Landau level. And in the case of graphene, if you count the electrons in the carbon atoms, in fact, at neutrality, which means without adding any extra electrostatic potential, you are right in the middle of the n equals 0 set of states, which means that this fourfold set of states is exactly half filled. So here I have added the names of the levels corresponding to the valley and spin label, but it's not yet clear, of course, what will happen exactly. In the case of this degenerate or almost degenerate set of states, then we will again have an occurrence of the phenomenon we discussed in the case of the spin degrees of freedom, which is the appearance of quantum Hall ferromagnetism. So that's something that should happen also in graphene. When you have complete integer filling of one of these set of Landau states. And this will happen, you see, when you are right in the middle of n equals 0. So you have two exactly filled Landau levels. Or it will happen also when you have just this guy which is filled, and also the case of completely filled of these fourfold degenerate states. But when these fourfold degenerate states are completely filled, then that's not a very interesting case, because we know that there is an energy gap which is essentially the cyclotron energy gap. So there is not much mystery in the physics in this case. While, of course, quantum Hall ferromagnetism is most interesting in the case of degenerate or quasi-degenerate states, because we know that it's exchange which is lifting the degeneracy. So this will happen for filling factor, which I will decide to call -1, so that's complete filling of one of these members of the quartet, or filling factor 0, filling exactly 2 lambda levels, or filling factor +1, in which you fill exactly 3 levels. So in the case of filling factor -1, then you can construct a Slater determinant in which you populate exactly all states where x is the guiding center coordinate in any gauge you like, and phi is simply one vector in the vector space spanned by the Valley spin degrees of freedom. So phi, let's see, is a member of the vector space generated by these 4 basis states. In the approximation in which you have completely exact SU4 symmetry, it may be any vector, okay? But then, of course, Zeeman effect as well as small anisotropies will select a subset of these and leads to the ordering of this guy at filling factor -1. So even though in the one-body picture we don't expect any gap in the spectrum at -1, then we expect that due to the Coulomb exchange interaction, there will be a gap at u equal -1. So one should see also an integer quantum Hall effect at filling factor -1. And the one-body picture tells us that we will find integer effect when the Fermi level is in these big gaps, okay? And quantum Hall ferromagnetism tells us that we will also see integer quantum Hall effect when the Fermi level is in between these guys. So that's a very simple Slater determinant. But since this space is of dimension 4, you see that at filling factor 0, then for each guiding center coordinate, you will have to choose 2 orbitals. So you will populate each of the states with 2 guys, where phi 1 and phi 2 will be 2 states, 2 orthogonal states in this same 4D space. So that's a very special case in which now we expect again that there will be also a gap due to the exchange interaction, and so this nu equals 0 filling, the neutrality of graphene, should display also an integer quantum Hall effect. And this is what is seen in the real world. In addition to the gaps due to the integer quantum Hall effect due to the big gaps, we also see all the gaps predicted by quantum Hall ferromagnetism. So let me show you a bit nice. So that's the equation for this. Complete filling in the case of nu equals 0. And in the exactly as in the spin case, these are exact eigenstates if you have SU4 symmetry, which is exact. Again, by the same argument that if you act with the Hamiltonian on this guy, if you describe 2 particles, you have no choice but recreating them in the same subset of space. So this is an exact eigenstate, provided the SU4 symmetry is exact. But that's exactly the usual quantum Hall ferromagnetism argument. So this is an experiment displaying the quantum Hall effect in graphene. In this case, you vary the magnetic field, that's the vertical axis, and then you are also able to vary the density So that's made by applying some electrostatic potential on top of the graphene layer. So without any extra potential, then graphene neutrality is right here. And you see that, so the color code is that the longitudinal resistance, when it is 0, that's a 2D plot of the longitudinal resistance. When you see that there's a brown region, it means that there is 0 longitudinal resistance. And that's the presence of the integer quantum Hall effect. So you see that there are, of course, filling factor +2 and -2 symmetrically. That corresponds to the cyclotron gaps in the spatial spectrum of graphene. But you see also that there are additional very striking proofs of the quantum Hall ferromagnetism that happens for +1, 0, and -1. On this sample, which is of very high quality, you see that this is something that we, of course, expect. There are additional traces that are also brown, so leading to the presence of, that are due to the presence of the fractional quantum Hall effect. And you see that the fractions we know in the case of the 2D electron gases also happen in the case of graphene. So that's something which is to be expected because we have all the ingredients needed to see the fractional quantum Hall effect. We have flat Landau levels, we have the Coulomb interaction, and in the central Landau level with 0 energy in monolayer graphene, I wrote down last time the wave functions. That have this shape. They are exactly given by the same wave functions of the lowest Landau levels in the unbounded plane, which means that all the matrix elements of Coulomb are exactly the same as in the case of the 2D electron gas. So when you are doing partial filling of the central Landau level, then we expect, of course, that it's simply a copy of what we see into the electron gases. A copy, provided, of course, we have now these extra degrees of freedom, which means that in addition to fully polarized state, we can also construct partially polarized or even singlet state using these additional degrees of freedom. So the fact that it's multi-component means that in addition to the usual fully polarized state that we know from 2D electron gases, there should be also some more interesting candidates that are hidden in this picture, in the details of this picture. So that's the case of monolayer graphene.
Thierry?
Oui.
Is there a simple reason why, for instance, 6 seems stronger than 4, 5? Can this be simply understood from the...
What we expect to be the strongest are the ones that do not correspond to quantum Hall ferromagnetism. So it should be +2, +6, +10,
Okay.
and -2, -6, -10. Let me show you some high quality, very recent high quality quantum Hall data on monolayer graphene. That's the conductance, yes, absolutely. So you see that the fraction should appear as very deep minima. And you see that we recognize the 1/3 filling fraction and many others. And this picture is even nicer than what we see in usual 2D electron gases. This is probably due to the fact that the geometry of the quantum Hall sample, it's not a whole bar. People have not constructed simply a whole bar, but they are using a disk geometry, which is called the Corbino disk geometry, in which you can measure only the longitudinal resistance by driving a current in the radial way. And that's the way which leads to the best measurements. So you recognize in the language of the composite fermion theory that I described some time ago, you recognize the series of fractions corresponding to the attachment of two flux tubes to each electron. So these are the series P over 2P plus 1 and P over 2P minus 1, converging to the Fermi C at filling factor 1/2. So these are these two series. And you see also that there is a very nice evidence for the associated series in which you associate 4 flux tubes per electron. So you should expect to see fractions corresponding to filling factors P over 4P plus 1 and P over 4P minus 1. And their particular symmetric partner. And you see that this is also very clearly seen in these samples. And it's likely also that in the future you see that there is even room for probably some of these small features are probably developing fractions that should be revealed by probably going to lower temperatures, better sample if possible. I have no idea about that. But, so that's a very nice instance of fractional quantum Hall effect in this case. While we are at it, let me also mention that it's feasible with the graphene layers to stack them. And I will discuss briefly 2 ways to do stacking of graphene layers. So, okay. So stacking graphene layers, okay. There is the chemical way to do this, which is simply having the 2 layers close to 1 atomic lattice spacing with a chemical bounding between the 2 layers. So this is called bilayer graphene. And the way which the chemistry prefers to stack the layers is having them shifted a little bit. So this is called Bernard stacking. So the hexagons are not on top of each other, but are just shifted by half lattice spacing. So this is called bilayer graphene. And then there is another way also to make stacking, which is to have simply 2 real layers, and then you add some material in between. So they are separated by a distance that you can more or less adjust depending on the sandwich you are creating. So these are called, in general, van der Waals heterostructures because the bonding is now just made by van der Waals interactions. And that's a wide field of study which is opened by the creation of these, because then you can stack several materials. You can stack monolayers of graphene, you can stack bilayers of graphene, you can change the material in between, and you can also stack other 2-dimensional materials like these very interesting transition metal decalcogenides that are also new 2D materials. So if you stack these layers, then you should be able to observe the same phenomenon that we discussed, which is the interlayer phase coherence. In the case of 2-dimensional electron gas, so we've been discussing the case of the 2D gas in bilayer form, in which at total filling factor unity, then you prefer to form this very special coherent state in which electrons prefer to be in a mixed state residing on both layers at once. So this has been recently studied in the case of graphene, and that's the result of the measurement. So it's also the conductance, it's also the same Corbino type geometry in which you normally have access to a very nice measurement of the conductance. So that's measurement of the conductance of a double layer of graphene with in between a material which is thin enough so that the interlayer distance is of the order of 1/2 of the magnetic length. But there is essentially no tunneling. That's just due to the nature of the material which is used. So that's the case of this experiment. So this lattice, this spacing between the layers is smaller than what has been done so far in electronic systems. So one should expect to find also evidence for new phenomena involving interlayer coherence. So we find again a phenomenon that was observed, which is the coherence and the appearance of a fraction at total filling factor unity. That's a big peak right in the middle. But then you see that again there are many fractions, many complicated fractions. Some of them can be explained by a generalization of the idea of composite fermions, which is a very simple picture. This is what is written here as 2 + 1 flux. So the idea is that in the usual composite fermion construction, you decide that you add 2 flux tubes onto each electron, and then these composite fermions, they do feel a reduced magnetic field. You generalize this idea in the case of a layer by saying that, okay, I'm going to attach again 2 flux tubes to each electron, but I will also add an extra flux tube which is due to the presence of the electron on the opposite layer. Which means that in the language of wave functions, 2 flux tubes means a Jastrow factor to the power 2, the Vandermonde determinant at the power 2. And you can also add a Vandermonde determinant to the power 1 corresponding to the coordinates of the electron living in the other layer. So with this simple idea, you explain many of these fractions as a generalized fractional quantum Hall effect for this, but not all fractions. Some of them very likely exhibit this phenomenon of interlayer phase coherence, and it's not yet completely understood how you can make a theory for that. It would mean that in the picture we have for the interlayer coherence phase in the case of bilayer electrons, then one would replace the electrons by one type of composite fermions that would prefer to live in a state delocalized between the 2 layers.
Sorry.
Yes, please.
Actually, you don't. The 2 layers are symmetric, so you put 2, for example, 2 fluxes on one and one to
Yes,
another.
yes.
But you can do the same opposite. You
Absolutely.
put 2.
That's it. That's what happens.
How do you know where you put 2 or where you put
No,
one?
you do this on both layers. You have half of the electrons in one layer and the other half in the other layer.
That's
On each layer, you have 2 flux tubes on your own layer and 1 flux tube on the opposite layer. And you do the same, exactly symmetrical construction in the other layer.
But with
So that's completely symmetric. That's a
But
completely
with Van der
symmetric
Waals,
idea.
you don't have tunneling, so how you can state where your statement comes from that electron is between? If Van
That's
der
just
Waals
Coulomb
usually-
repulsion. No,
Ah.
that's Coulomb repulsion. The layers are close enough so that you feel by the Coulomb repulsion the presence or absence of electrons. But there is no tunneling.
no hybridization of the
Yeah,
function.
Yes, yes.
No.
So that's just the effect of the Coulomb repulsion only. Then there will be probably an even richer picture if you allow tunneling between the layers.
In case of bilayer, the tunneling was important, yes? Or not yet?
In the case of you mean electrons,
Usual bilayer.
these cases have been studied. Both cases have been studied with tunneling and without tunneling. So in the case of the absence of tunneling, then there is very nice interlayer coherence phenomena. These are killed by tunneling. And there is presumably, the explanation is plausible but not completely proved, that when you have tunneling and when you put a magnetic field which is in plane, then you kill the gap created by this interlayer phase coherence, and it seems that this is due to a incommensurate phase transition as a function of an in-plane field. So if we are able to construct samples well, not we, but if somebody is able to construct samples with tunneling, in the case of 2 layers of graphene, then one should have an equivalent and even richer picture. Very likely. But then this is simply just Coulomb repulsion between the layers and no tunneling so far. And that's already quite complicated, as you see. So many of the fractions can presumably be explained by the composite fermion construction enlarged in this way. But there are some fractions, as I said, that should be described by this coherence phenomena involving composite fermions. So that's the case of a double layer of graphene. Let me briefly go back to the case of monolayer graphene. And I would like to discuss briefly the bond structure of bilayer graphene. So if you are making bilayer graphene, it means that the unit cell is enlarged by a factor of 2. So instead of having 2 electrons per unit cell, you have now 4 electrons per unit cell. So which means that close to the Fermi level, you will have 4 bonds. 4 bonds instead of 2 in the case of monolayer graphene. In the case of monolayer graphene, we know that we have this very special bond touching at the Fermi level, this bond touching with conical points. While this does not happen in the case of bilayer graphene, we instead have quadratic bond touching. So let me describe some part of the Brillouin zone. So this is the wave vector, this is the energy. So we have quadratic bond touching. And then there are 2 additional bonds at a slightly higher energy, and this is due to the hopping between the layers. And in the case of bilayer graphene, they are chemically coupled, and there is an important hopping between them. So this quadratic bond touching means that, of course, the structure of Landau levels will be very different from those of monolayer graphene. You see that there is now a finite density of states at the Fermi energy. And if you write down the Hamiltonian in a magnetic field, you find that for one valley, there are also 2 valleys, let me call this K, h bar omega naught. So I will project onto these 2 low-lying bonds, which is an approximation which is not that great, while it's a very good approximation in the case of monolayer graphene. It's not that great in the bilayer case. But anyway, it's much simpler. Let me use A and A dagger, the ladder operators for the harmonic oscillators corresponding to the cyclotron motion. So that's the way the Hamiltonian looks. So then you can solve for the eigenspectrum of this guy, and you find that, interestingly, there are 2 Landau levels now that are degenerate and that have exactly 0 energy. They are constructed by making column vectors in which you put either the lowest Landau level wave functions or the first Landau level wave functions of the plane. These are degenerate with an index which I will not write, because you see that since I have now A squared instead of A in the case of monolayer graphene, this of course will be annihilated because this is the 0 mode of the cyclotron operator. So which means that phi naught is in the lowest Landau level. And then you have also the fact that phi 1, it's A acting on phi naught, so it is also 0, which means that now the situation is even richer because now we have 2 degenerate levels. The other Landau lovers, they just have a linear dispersion as a function of B, which is not surprising because precisely we have a quadratic bond structure. So as a function of B, they just have the usual Farn diagram. The only difference being that now we have also Landau levels corresponding to negative values of n. There are also levels going to negative energy, I mean below the Fermi energy. So which means that in the central Landau level, now there is an eightfold degeneracy, valley, the k-index, the spin, and this orbital degeneracy. So which means that total it's eightfold. But this degeneracy between n equals 0 and n equal 1, it's far from being exact. Of course, we expect that it will be lifted by band structure effects if we add. So that's obtained in a very simple time binding model with the minimal number of hoppings. If we add some further hopping, then the degeneracy between these guys is slightly lifted. And then there is also a very interesting phenomenon that happens, which is the analogous of the lamp shift of atomic physics, is that in the case of graphene, all these guys are filled. So which means that if you have two levels that are right at the Fermi level that are empty, in fact, they fill the polarization of the Dirac sea, which means that they are no longer degenerate due to exchange with these filled levels. So there is no symmetry reason that protect these guys and keep their degeneracy intact. So in the real case, we expect that the symmetry between these two levels is completely broken. So nevertheless, there should be a central octet of state instead of a quartet of state, which we can feel, and again we will find that due to quantum ferromagnetism, complete filling of these levels should lead to the appearance of the integer quantum Hall effect with all the fillings between -4 and +4, corresponding to all partial fillings of these 8 Landau levels. So that's a natural way to discuss what happens when you are filling Landau levels with an orbital character which is not the orbital character of the lowest Landau level, but with the orbital character of the first excited Landau level. In the case of bilayer graphene, it means that it should happen in the following way. Let me draw the energy. In fact, we know that if we compute the exchange energy is not the same in n equals 0 and n equals 1, because the wave functions are not the same. And we find that the exchange energy is stronger in the case of n equals 0. Which means that if we guess that it's the exchange which is the main reason for the splitting between n equals 0 and n equals 1, we should find an ordering of level which is like this, where the extra degeneracy is lifted by, then I will randomly decide that this is due to spin okay. So as a function of the filling factor, we will alternate between levels of character n equals 0 and n equals 1. So if now we look at the reasoning we did for studying the quantum Hall effect, we use the fact that it's probably physically reasonable when the cyclotron gap is large enough to study the physics projected onto a given Landau level. If we change, so it's always the Coulomb interaction which is the main drive for this physical phenomena. So when we change the Landau level, it means that we are just changing the wave functions. So if we are going to make the simple theories which I described before, you just change the orbital wave functions, you compute the matrix element of the Coulomb interaction, let's say in second quantized language. So it's equivalent to slightly changing the potential. Instead of having the Fourier transform of the potential, so E squared over R as a Fourier transform, which is 2 pi E squared over Q. When you are going from the lowest Landau level to the n equal 1 Landau level, you will multiply this by some function of the wave vector, which you can compute by using the wave functions appropriate to the n equal Landau level. So it will probably change the physics a bit. Does it change dramatically the physics? In fact, the answer is yes, and that's something which has been discovered a long time ago. And the main difference, because there is a main difference, the main difference is that if you are looking at the fractional quantum Hall effect in the n equal 1 Landau level, then you discover that now you have a quantum Hall effect with an even denominator. And that's surprising, this even denominator. That's surprising because in the composite fermion construction which I described, you have some kind of mother fraction which is the Laughlin state, 1/3. And the denominator of the fraction is really due to the special shape of this wave function. And if now you use this wave function to construct essentially all the composite fermion states, then you just see that you will always generate denominators which are odd. That's the 2p plus minus 1 that we described. That can be generalized to 4p plus 1 in the case of 4 flux tubes. And you are forced to do that for Pauli principal reasons. That's essentially the anti-symmetry of the Laughlin wave functions that propagates in the composite fermion construction. So if we use this construction, we are forced to have only odd denominators. Of course, if we had spin degrees of freedom, then things may be different. But anyway, all polarized fractions should have even denominator. Should have odd denominator, sorry. So the observation of an even denominator was something of a mystery. That was a long time ago. It has been confirmed since that time by many experiments. So let me show you.
But that cannot be related to your discussion of n0 and 1 degeneracy, yes? Because it's another
Yes,
system.
I will discuss that again. Yes. So this is the longitudinal resistivity, the main plot. This is the usual Hall resistance as a function of the magnetic field between the filling factors 2 and 3. So that's usual two-dimensional electron gas, not graphene, it's just electron gas. So between 2 and 3, it means that you have complete filling of the lowest Landau levels with the 2 spin values. Okay? And then when you are between 2 and 3, it means that you are filling the lowest spin branch of the first n equal 1 state. So n equals 0, lowest orbital Landau levels, you will have 2 sets of states with the 2 spin values. Then n equal 1, you are filling 2 sets of states with spin values. So u equal 2 is here, and u equals 3 is here. So that's the boundaries of the magnetic field here. So you see that there is a clear fraction at filling factor 5/2 that also leads to a plateau in the Hall resistance. It's even better seen in some sample. You see that at 2 plus 1/2, you have zero longitudinal resistance, and you have a very nice plateau at 2 plus 1/2. So which means that you are in the case, so these two guys are completely filled, and you have half filling of the first orbital Landau level. If you believe that the physics is the same between n equals 0 and n equals 1, you would expect the composite fermion Fermi-C. That would be your first guess, which has no gap, which would have no quantization of the whole resistance, and no gap, so a finite resistance, as is observed in the lowest Landau level. This is not at all the case. We see that clearly there is a gap, and there are associated edge modes that leads to this quantized whole resistance. There are some phenomena that are probably conventional. You see that there is some evidence for 2 plus 1/3 fractional quantum Hall effect, 2 plus 1/5, so with the associated plateaus. So that's the naive expectation for the physics of this n equal 1 Landau level, because you say, okay, these guys are inert, provided the cyclotron energy is large enough, and then you slightly change the Coulomb potential due to the change of the orbitals, and maybe it doesn't change much, so we should recover for the shifted fillings exactly the same fractions we see in the lowest Landau level. This is not completely true, as we see. Clearly some fraction survives, but there is this new fraction with an even denominator.
And 3/8 also?
Okay, it's not sure at all. This is a small feature, and you have to be a little bit optimistic.
So apart from 3/8, 1/2 is the only even one.
Yes, yes, right. In this case, absolutely, yes. Let me add a few things. It's not absolutely clear that even though the filling factor is the correct one, that it is the same physics at 1/3 in the lowest Landau level. The only thing you know from these measurements is that there is a gap, and you have edge modes to carry the currents so that you have quantized resistance. So that's fine, but it's not a direct proof that this guy, for example, is an n equal 1 replica of the Laughlin wave function. Maybe that's the simplest explanation, but logically it's not that it's not that clear.
N equals 2. N equals 2 replica. You told n equals 1 replica.
N equal 1 orbital. Sorry. Yes, sorry. When I'm discussing n equals 0, n equal 1, that's the orbital character. And with the two spin state, when you are in the n equal 1 Landau level, it means that it's filling factors between 2 and 4 due to the speed. So there is a fraction with an even denominator. There are also complicated phenomena that we believe are not due to the appearance of the quantum Hall effect. Is that so you see plateaus, but you see something very bizarre, which is that you have plateaus, but they are going back to 2 or 3 integer case, even though this happens for fractional filling factor. So this is believed, but again, it's still a matter of debate. It is believed that for these special values of the filling factor, you are removing electrons from the conduction properties by making a crystal of bubbles of electrons, which means that they are essentially removed, so you should change the filling factor, and you should be back to the case of integer filling between 2 and 3. It is believed that such states may be described by simple Hartree-Fock theory for these extra electrons, so it's probably not something with exotic properties like quasi-particles with fractional charge and so on. But this is not, there is no complete theory yet for this phenomenon, which is called the reentrant integer quantum Hall effect. Because you see that instead of moving on the quantum Hall on the line of the usual Hall effect, then you go back to the nearest integer value of the Hall effect. So that's something peculiar to this n equal 1 Landau level. Then of course you will ask, but so what happened in n equal 2? Well, in n equal 2, the fractional quantum Hall states essentially disappears. In most samples, there is no longer any quantum Hall physics. And it's likely, but not completely sure, that the physics can be captured by Hartree-Fock type states in which you break translation symmetry. So more or less Hartree-Fock type charge density waves.
Eisenstein experiments.
Right, yes, right. Yes. But so the novelty is that there is this fraction with yes.
Just again, so if you remove some charges from the game, I would understand that you go up for the plateau, but here also you go down sometimes.
You can also remove holes.
Okay, that's okay.
So that's more or less, yes, another sample with similar results in which the re-entrant integer quantum Hall effect is not that clear. So, in the case of graphene, the situation leads to the appearance of even more cases in which you have even denominator fractions. So these are measurements of the quantum Hall effect in the case of graphene, in which you are looking at several different orbital Landau levels. So n equal 1, n equal 2, n equal 3. And what you see is that there is a quite strange phenomenon in the sense that in the n equal 1 level, you observe fractional states that are plausibly explained by the usual composite fermions with two flux tubes. Okay, so it will give you predictions for fraction. In the n equal 2 Landau level, you see some fractions that are presumably explained by the composite fermions using 4 flux tubes, but the 2 flux tubes have disappeared. And now if you look at the third Landau level, orbital character for graphene, then you find that the only remaining fractions, they are more or less quite clear in this sample, they all have even denominator. So there are inert levels that you should add to find the total filling factor. But the important fact is that all these guys, they have this bizarre 1/2 denominator, this 1/2 fractions. It's 1/2 plus some integer, which is presumably not that important. So it means that there is evidence for an important role of some quantum Hall states with this half denominator. So there are many attempts to describe this. I will spend some time. Okay, I will spend some time describing an attempt for understanding the physics. Okay, of the half-field Landau level by guessing a wave function. So we know that Laughlin has been quite successful by proposing a very nice wave function, essentially on variational grounds, simplicity on the fact that it has a good variational energy. In the case of the half-field Landau level, n equal 1 Landau level, Moore and Reed have proposed also a wave function with a different ID. Their ID was related to conformal field theory. So I will just first write down the wave function, and then I will explain the relationship with conformal field theory. So their proposal is the following. So we have a Jastrow factor, which is good for putting particles away from each other. So if you want to have a Jastrow factor type wave function with filling factor 1/2, you can try to write this. I will omit the exponential prefactor, which I explained. It's a universal factor, which is here for any many-body wave function. And as we argued, this probably describes a state with filling factor 1/2, which you can compute by various techniques. But then anyway, it's 1/2. If you do this, of course, there is an obvious problem, is that this is a symmetric wave function. So it cannot be a fully polarized spin state. If you put all spins polarized, then this guy is symmetric, so that's bad. So for reasons which I describe later, they decide that they will multiply this by an antisymmetric factor which doesn't change the degree, the total degree. Well, it changes the degree, but it doesn't change the filling factor. The filling factor on this, it comes from the count in the counting of the degree by the terms that are quadratic in the number of particles, which means that if you change by some factor whose degree is linear in the number of particles, it will not change the filling factor. So in fact, you have a lot of choice. So what they decide to do is the following. This means Pfaffian of 1 over Zi minus Zj. So let me define this stuff. What is the Pfaffian? So the Pfaffian is the following construction. The Pfaffian of a matrix, if you compute the determinant of a matrix which is antisymmetric, you find that it's a square. Just by algebra, it's a square. And it's a square of something which is called the Pfaffian. You can compute it, in fact, and this Pfaffian, let's say, of a matrix, of an antisymmetric matrix. So I will write it in an obscure but precise way. It's the sum of all permutations, of the sign of the permutation, and then I make A sigma of 1, sigma of 2, A sigma of 2, sigma of 3, up to A sigma of n minus 1, sigma of n, where sigma is a permutation of n objects. So French people like to write this way. So it means that, for example, if you have a simple matrix which is 4 by 4, the Pfaffian of this matrix will be simply so that's the Pfaffian in the case of a 4 by 4 antisymmetric matrix in which there are only 3 elements, non-zero. Okay, so that's the Pfaffian. So it's not some crazy construction, but why would we do that? In fact, the reason is very simple, because it comes from superconductivity. So we know the BCS wave function, but the BCS wave function, you always see it written in second quantized language. Okay, in second quantized language, it's nice and compact. You have product of a momenta, some coherence factor, UK, VK, and then you create Cooper pairs. Minus K spin up, plus K spin up, minus K spin down, acting on not on the vacuum, on the Fermi-C. Okay, so that's the BCS state. So that's a very nice expression, fine, in second quantized language, and it doesn't have a definite number of particles. It's a sum of states with different number of particles. If you project it onto a state with a fixed number of particles, then the formula you obtain, it's precisely a Pfaffian. It's just because it's the maximally antisymmetric combination you can make. That's all. So there is no big mystery concerning the appearance of the Pfaffian. It's just due to the projection of a paired wave function. This formula is written, for example, in the book by Dejean about superconductivity. There is the expression of the BCS projected on a fixed number of particles. Great, so that's an idea coming from the projection onto a fixed number of particles of the pairing of something. The matrix here, so which has to do with the pairing, it's 1 over Zi minus Zj, which means that the pairing wave function is 1 over Z. So if you believe that this is due to pairing, it means that it has to do with the pairing of something in a state which is something like px minus ipy. And because as a function of the angle, this is like e to the minus I theta. So it's a pairing in the L equal -1 orbital state. Okay? Now you say, okay, I don't want fractions, I want a polynomial. But that's okay, because you see that there are enough factors here so that even if you remove some of them by the Pfaffian, you still have a polynomial. So that's fine. It's still a polynomial. And there is a funny way also to manipulate this function. So this is called, let me erase this definition. So this wave function, it's called the Pfaffian. So let me write one additional formula and then we'll make a small break. Yes. So that's a wave function which is antisymmetric because the Pfaffian is antisymmetric. You can also write the Pfaffian wave functions for a state of bosons. And that's very simple to do because imagine that we have some wave function of the Z's for spin polarized fermions. So it is antisymmetric. So it means that we can always factor out this Jastrow factor, the Vandermonde determinant, times a wave function which is necessarily symmetric. So this is a wave function that is certainly a decent wave function for a system of bosons. Okay, even though we don't know what happens to the Hamiltonian in this transformation, of course. But anyway, that's some simple mathematical statement. So we can cook up a bosonic Pfaffian. I decided to put PF down. Okay, so the bosonic Pfaffian, it's simply the product of a Vandermonde determinant times the Pfaffian of 1 over Zi minus Zj. Well, of course, you have, I guess that you have many questions still. Why should I put 1 over this and not put simply Zi minus Zj? That would be adding some extra factor and so on. So this I will describe. It comes really from the original idea of Moore and Reed, which is not simply guessing wave functions. It's something different. And if you have this polynomial, so again, this is a polynomial, there is a very nice way to write it. So that's not completely trivial mathematics exercise. This is equal to, let me divide the coordinates into 2 packets of same size. So there are n particles. I divide them into 2 packets. So this is first packet. This is the second packet of equal size, n over 2. So I divide my particles into 2 sets, 2 subsets, okay? And then, of course, I don't want any difference. Everybody is equal in this game, so I should symmetrize into the choice between these packets. And that's precisely equal to this. But it's not that obvious. Huh?
In the product,
Yes,
each of z's is within this pocket.
Absolutely.
Packet,
Absolutely.
Not between, no?
absolutely.
So mixing appears only when you symmetrize.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely. So it's a complicated way to write this. It's a complicated way to compute this also.
And the boundaries, division is arbitrary. Division between these two.
Absolutely. But then you have to symmetrize. So this arbitrariness disappears completely because you sum of all ways,
All possible cases.
Yes. all manners to divide your sets into two packets. But then, when it's written like this, you see something which is very convenient. So, in the case of the Laughlin state, the Laughlin wave function, it's nice, but it's also nice because there is a simple Hamiltonian whose ground state is the Laughlin wave function, which is a nice property because then we can think about deforming the Hamiltonian and have an adiabatic relation between the Laughlin wave function and some realistic potential. In this case, imagine that I take a potential between my bosons, which is not a two-body interaction, but a three-body interaction. And I put delta functions between particles. Let me look at this guy. If I take three particles, okay? If I take three particles, and you look at, so three particles, two can be in the same packet, okay? In which case, for the Pfaffian, it is annihilated by one of these factors, okay? And then you have the remaining particle, but then necessarily it should be also equal to 0, which means that with this property, because there are only two packets, so if you take three particles, at least two of them are in the same packet. They may be, all three may be in the same packet, so you are sure that the energy is 0. But then it will work, which means that this simple Hamiltonian will have a zero energy ground state exactly given by this Pfaffian wave function in the both cases. And that's nice. It's not that awful. It's just a three-body contact interaction. So we know that in the case of bosons, in the quantum regime, which of course is a bit hypothetical, then a simple three-body contact interaction will have as a ground state the Pfaffian wave function. And since in fact this Hamiltonian is a set of projectors, it's positive definite, so it's really the ground state. Now in the case of fermions, so this guy, you can also cook up an Hamiltonian whose ground state is the Pfaffian ground state. It's slightly more complicated, but you get the idea, because fermions may have relative angular momentum which is non-zero, but it cannot be arbitrarily large in this wave function. In fact, the corresponding Hamiltonian, it's not so obvious to derive. Let me just state the result. You just have to act with derivative operators on the delta functions. So it's almost like the bosonic Pfaffian. You have to symmetrize over these indices. And if you want it to be a positive guy, I think you have even to put a minus sign. It's not that obvious that this is a physically sensible Hamiltonian, but at least from a mathematical point of view, that's a very decent operator. So these guys, they have this mysterious Pfaffian as their ground state. I will explain in more detail. We will make a break now, so I will explain in more detail after the break why this is a good idea. Okay. So let me now discuss the main motivation for the introduction of this Pfaffian wave function by Moore and Reed. What they proposed is something completely different from the original approach of Laughlin. So there is something which I decided not to discuss. It's the fact that there is some effective field theory description of these fractional quantum Hall states, which is based on Chern-Simons field theory. That's a very interesting approach, which normally encodes the low energy properties, like the braiding of quasi-particles in a very efficient way. And it's nevertheless an approach in which you can't compute things quantitatively. You cannot estimate gaps or phase transitions, details, and you don't have explicit wave function, trial wave functions. Nevertheless, that's an inspiring construction that led Moore and Reed to propose that if you have some CFT, so some conformal field theory living in two dimensions, then you may construct candidate wave functions using correlators of the operators of such a CFT. So that's a mysterious statement which is not guaranteed to work. You are guaranteed to have wave functions with nice properties from the field theory point of view. And then it's up to you to see if there are physical systems in which these are plausible ground state, or at least if there are systems that are in the same universality class as these modeled wave functions. So a CFT is living in two dimensions, which means that the fields are living in a plane, so with x and y coordinates from which you can construct a z coordinate, the complex one. So if you look at correlation functions of a 2D CFT, it will give us certainly functions of the z coordinates that are ready to be used as a quantum Hall trial wave function. But then there is something else, is that these two, so you see that these two dimensions in the quantum Hall problem, they correspond to space dimensions. So coordinates, arguments of the wave function in space. But then in CFT, it's plausible that there is also this bulk boundary correspondence. Which means that you may interpret these two dimensions. Let me write this very striking equation that 2 is also 1 plus 1, where you have 1 which is space and 1 which is time. Meaning that the same wave function should be used also to describe the quantum mechanics of a 1D system which is living at the edge of the system. So this CFT construction will give us candidate wave functions to describe the bulk, and will also give us candidates to describe the edge mode excitations of the theory. So let's try to see what it means. So far it's of course a bit obscure. In the simplest cases we can think of. So the simplest CFT one can construct is that of a free boson phi, which I will call phi. So a free boson in 2D, that's something a bit special, because if you compute the propagator of the free boson, it's an object which grows logarithmically. So it's not at all a decent field by itself. And the objects that are physical are exponentials of this boson. And you can cook up correlation functions of exponential of bosons. I will add some coefficient here, let me alpha 1, alpha n, the n. And provided you use correct coefficients alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha n, you will have, for this correlation function, an algebraic decay. And this may be related to the critical behavior of many 2D systems. So that's a way to explain, to describe the critical phenomena in two-dimensional classical systems. Provided you choose correctly the exponent, you can also arrange this correlator. So with some unknown normalization, which I will not write down, it's not that important for the field phi. This may be taken to be equal to Zi minus Zj.
Sorry.
Yes.
When you define this exponential, usually we need to require that the sum of the factors
Of the charges, yes,
sum
absolutely.
up to 0. But here,
When I write the general correlator with alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha n, okay, the sum of these alphas should be 0 for the correlation function to be non-zero. Okay. If you want to have a correlation function which is not 0 for all these guys with the same sign, it means that you have to remove the background charge. Okay. So let's do that. I add some operator independent of the z's, so that this guy is not 0. So it's an ad hoc construction. It gives us a very simple polynomial, and that seems a very contrived way to construct a very simple polynomial. I mean, it's mathematically correct that the correlation function of these exponentials is exactly equal to this product of factors. So if you change the power here, you can even construct the Laughlin wave function just by changing the exponent in the exponential operators. Fine. So that's a free boson theory. What about fermions? If you look at fermions in critical theories in 2 dimensions, then the simplest building block you can find is the Majorana fermion. The Majorana fermion, it's well known in the case of the Ising model because it describes the critical theory of the 2D Ising model. It's a continuous theory which is described by a Majorana fermion, so it's a field, so living in 2D, which is real. Let me write this simple equation. So this guy living in 2 dimensions, you can compute correlation functions of n such guys. Of n such Majorana fermions, and if you do this, you find, and that's the miracle I wanted to show you, you find precisely the Pfaffian of 1 over Zi minus Zj. That's just a fact of life about Majorana fermions or the Ising model. So yes, Bill?
Just going back to the free boson case,
Yes.
you got a fermionic wave function out of bosonic correlators? Or, right, because that Zi minus Zj is handy.
This you can cook up. That's something special in 1 plus 1 dimension. In what we call usually in 1D systems bosonization, with exponential of bosons, you can arrange anti-commutation relations.
Look like a free one-dimensional, free Majorana fermions with linear spectrum, yes?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a critical theory. So it means that if I write down the Lagrangian for this guy, it's something like that. Let me integrate over dx maybe. It's a free Majorana fermion. Okay. That would be just one chirality of the Majorana fermion. Okay. So now, if you have a free boson and a free fermion, you can decide that you just make the product of these guys. So you can decide that the next complicated state after the free boson of the free fermion is that you can make products. So you decide that you are going to look at a CFT in which you have the product of one boson and one Majorana fermion. So you decide that you allow operators that are made of one Majorana and one boson operator. Maybe that's, no, sorry, I'm writing almost the same, so let me use some big O. So that's the Majorana, and that's the exponential of the bosonic field. So now, if you compute the correlation function of such guy, you will find exactly the bosonic Pfaffian. So there will be factorization between the Fermi part and the Bose part. The Fermi part gives me exactly this Pfaffian of 1 over z, and then the Laughlin part, its power is exactly chosen to create the van der Monde to the power unity, so that we are just creating the bosonic Pfaffian. So now, if the idea of Moore and Reid is correct, it means that if I'm able to find an Hamiltonian for which this is the ground state, I will discover a new universality class in which I will have physical properties dictated by this CFT, and notably the edge structure of this state should be described by the same CFT. So I should discover at the edge a boson and a Majorana fermion. And that's not built in. So far, we have just used the recipe to build the wave function. We have used the recipe to build the wave function, and we have been able to discover, but that's something different, we have been able to discover an Hamiltonian for which this is the ground state. So I will use so far the bosonic case, okay, because as I showed you, the Hamiltonian is simpler. It's just the three-body contact interaction. So we have an Hamiltonian. We know that it's the ground state per construction, but that's all. We have no proof that it has a gap, and we don't know its edge mode. Okay, so this we have to investigate. The first spectacular thing is that on top of the ground state, you want to know something about the excited states. And we know that we can cook up neutral excitations, which I have not discussed in detail, and I will not do that today. And there are also the quasi-particles. So you can say, aha, let's try to do the same approach as we did in the Laughlin case. So in the case of the Laughlin wave function, I decided to create a quasi-hole simply by applying a factor in which I'm creating a hole in the density as position big Z. Okay? And maybe that's a decent candidate. How can we, so we can certainly write down this wave function in the case of the Pfaffian. We just use the Pfaffian here, and that's a wave function. Fine, but what is the relationship with the true eigenstates of the Hamiltonian? Okay. So, if we were to create this guy, we know that the charge is essentially given by the filling factor. That's the reasoning we did in the Laughlin case. This guy has a charge which is E over 2. But it's a candidate wave function. It's not that clear that it is an excitation of the system. To create such a guy, we know that we have this is something we discussed in the case of the Laughlin state. We create such a quasi-hole by adding a flux quantum to the system. Plus one flux quantum. So let's do this. We forget all this science fiction and we just put the three-body Hamiltonian in the computer and we diagonalize the spectrum. We obtain the spectrum exactly. We know the Hamiltonian, it's this three-body coupling, and to obtain the Pfaffian, then we can compute from the explicit wave function, we can compute the relation between the number of flux quanta and the number of particles. If this relation is satisfied, and that we diagonalize the three-body contact interaction, then the ground state is guaranteed to be the Pfaffian. That's just pure mathematics. Now we add one flux quantum and we look at the spectrum. Let me show you what you discover. You discover this. It's a bit sketchy, okay? This figure is a bit sketchy. Let's see. So pure three-body contact interaction, bosons. That's the energy, and we are doing this on the sphere so that we can classify eigenstate by the total angular momentum. And you see that, wow, it doesn't work at all. We find 4 states, not 1. Let me show you what we observed in the Laughlin case. A long time ago, okay. That was what we saw in the Laughlin case. We take the Laughlin state, we add one flux quantum, and we create only one guy, the quasi-electron. Here what we see is different, and in fact you see that it's strikingly close to this. 2 quasi-particles and not 1. With 2 quasi-particles, you can combine them into orbital angular multiplets, and the angular momentum separation is 2 by 2 due to the statistics between the quasi-particles. That's exactly what we observe with this crazy contact Hamiltonian. Oof. 0, 2, 4, 6. So we discover that in reality, the lowest energy excitations with one flux quantum added, they are not given by this state. If we do this, we find that there are 2 quasi-particles, which means that the charge of these guys is not E over 2, but it's 1/2 of this. So the elementary excitations of the Pfaffian state, they have charge E over 4. So there is some extra fractionalization. So normally, if this Pfaffian story is true, it means that if we perform the same shot noise type measurement that was done in the 1/3 case, one should observe direct evidence for a charge which is E over 4. That would be a very nice smoking gun for a state which is the Pfaffian or in the same universality class as the Pfaffian. There is some complicated stuff going on with particle symmetry, which I will just say a few words about that at the end. Okay. So there is something which I will not discuss because it's a bit tricky, is that then of course you want to construct wave functions for these quasi-holes that have this charge which is E over 4. So I will not do that because it's rather technically involved. When you do this, you discover that, strangely enough, there are several ways to create these quasi-particles, and this is due to this extra Majorana degree of freedom. So that's a complete story, which is in which you discover that in addition to the phase, that occurs when you interchange quasi-particles. There is also a non-abelian degeneracy, which means that the space spanned by the quasi-particle has an extra index, giving you braiding as matrices acting on this extra index. But I will not have time to discuss that. The thing I would like to discuss to finish this lecture is that if you believe this Morehead approach, yes, Bill?
I just wanted to ask about, can I think about I'm creating this E over 2 charge, the other 2 quasi-particles, because I'm multiplying by this thing that goes over both packets, and if I just created it in one packet, I'd get an E over 4 excitation, or?
So that's a good question. I don't know how to think about it in the 2-packet formalism. The way we can create particles is making some change inside the Pfaffian factor. Instead of having an overall multiplicative factor to create the quasi-particle, you can decide to make something like this, but inside the Pfaffian factor itself. So it's quite obscure how it appears in the 2-packet formalism. Maybe it's known, but not by me. So if we are to believe this CFT construction, it also means that we should discover the very same CFT at the edge of the system. Okay? Let's try to do this. Again, we have the possibility of taking this 3-body contact interaction that we know is certainly is in the Pfaffian universality class, and look at its spectrum in a geometry in which we have edges, so that we can clarify the nature of the edges. So for this, I have to discuss a little bit something which I've avoided. It's the edge structure of the quantum Hall states. So as a warm-up, let's look at the edge excitations of the simplest integer quantum Hall state at filling factor unity. So I have electrons in the lowest Landau level, and I'm looking at the gas which is confined by, let's say, a parabolic potential. So this is the bulk. And then the potential is rising, and the Fermi level is somewhere here at the edge. So I have fully occupied orbitals. That's the nu equal 1 integer quantum Hall. And then I have empty orbitals. And the Fermi level is somewhere here. So that's the situation in which you see a plateau in the quantum Hall state. The Fermi level lies in the localized states, and there are localized states here somewhere on the left. Let's look at the low energy excitations of the system. Then the low energy excitations of the system, they are quite simple to describe because these are particle Hall excitations of a 1D chiral system with only one chirality. Everybody has a positive velocity, so there are only particles moving to the right, let's say. And then the lowest energy is obtained by taking the highest occupied orbital and putting this electron in the lowest unoccupied orbital. There is only one way to do that. Then you have, so the first excited state, there is only one way to do that. That's the unit particle excitation you can do. Now, if you look at the second excited state, you can take this electron and put it on the second orbital, unoccupied, or you can also take these two guys and shift them by one unit, both. So there is two possibilities to do that. And then, as you look at higher and higher excited states, there are more and more possibilities to create excited states. It's very simple to count them, of course. So let me just take the result. Yes. So you find that so the ground state is unique. Let me add some 1. Then you find that it's 3, 5, 7, 11, and so on. You discover that it's also the same way as counting bosons. Instead of counting the particle excitations, this is also a boson counting, which means that you can perfectly describe the particle excitations by using a Bose field, Bose creation operators. So it's really the same. So that's the basis of the powerful approach of 1D quantum systems named as bosonization. And in fact, if you have two chiral-ities, you can describe the particle excitations by an Hamiltonian in which you will use simply then the boson creation and annihilation operators with Q non-zero. That's an operator that will capture exactly the spectrum of the particle excitations on both sides if you allow Q to be positive or negative. Okay? So, and this is certainly the whole story in the case of filling factor 1. Okay? From this boson, you can, of course, cook up a continuum field phi of x, which is the boson that we have been using in our CFT construction. Okay? So that's fine for the excitations on top of nu equal 1. You can certainly guess that things are going the same if we are looking at the Laughlin state at filling factor 1/3. Why is that so? Well, there is a limit in which we can certainly see that it's very close to this. That's in the, imagine that the Laughlin state is not the ground state of the system, but we are looking at this tau-tauless wave function. The tau-tauless wave function, it's a Slater determinant in which you occupy one orbital out of 3 in a consecutive way. So it means that if the ground state were the tau-tauless state, then the edge structure would be simply that I have 1 electron, 2 zeros, 1 electron, 2 zeros, 1 electron, and so on, up to the Fermi level. And the Fermi level is right here. And then, of course, you can repeat the same story. You can construct particle Hall states on top of this special Slater determinant, and the counting of the bosonic modes will be the same. Which means that you will guess that if tau-tauless were correct, then certainly the edge theory would be described also by a bosonic field theory, by the excitations of a bosonic field theory. In the case of the Laughlin state, in fact, we know that this tau-tauless state, it's a limiting case of the Laughlin wave function, and the limiting case is obtained if we consider a cylinder geometry. In the Landau gauge, the wave functions are a plane wave times a Gaussian factor, like this. And you can certainly impose periodic boundary conditions onto the y direction, which means that you can impose that the particles are living on a cylinder. And in fact, if you send the radius of the cylinder to 0, so the opposite of the thermodynamic limit, then you discover that if you look at the Hamiltonian, then the Hamiltonian simplifies into an electrostatic repulsion problem, and the ground state evolves to a simple Slater at filling factor 1/3 to a simple Slater determinant, which is the tau-taurus state.
But it looks like repulsion, but rather in momentum space. I mean, in
Absolutely,
space.
it's repulsion. Yes, absolutely. The sites are in K space. Absolutely, because it looks like sites, but these are the quantized K values. Absolutely. So it's a tricky way of looking at these states. Absolutely. So there is a way to go continuously from the tau-taurus state to the Laughlin state, and it seems, well, there are good arguments for that, that essentially the edge picture doesn't change, which means that it's the same particular excitations that can be described by bosonic fields that are also the edge excitations of the Laughlin state. Let me show you some pictures about this. So that's a cylinder in which you decide that along the cylinder you will add some shallow confining potential so that the particles prefer to stay in this blue area, and then there are some areas where nobody likes to live. Okay? If you are using this geometry, you can have edge excitations right at the boundary of the droplet, which is in the middle of the system. Okay? In such a geometry, if the minimum of the potential is more or less in the middle of the cylinder, it means that you will have two edges, and these two edges will have opposite directions of propagation. So it will be like a 1D usual system with left and right movers, except that they are separated in space. The picture is not that, okay, it was nicer on my screen, but okay, okay. Let's diagonalize the Hamiltonian for the hardcore V1 model, the one which is, whose ground state is the Laughlin state. Let's diagonalize the Hamiltonian in the case that I have enough orbitals on both sides of the droplet so that there are edge modes. And you discover that there is a set of low-lying states, these guys, then there is a gap, and then bulk excited states. So the interpretation is that, okay, that's normal. This is the quasi-particle gap on top of the Laughlin states, and all these guys are edge modes excitations. There are many of them, of course. And you see that, that's funny, because we see arches at the bottom. Let's make a close-up and discover something which is very simple. This is the lowest lying envelope of the states. And you see that it has arches, and I claim that this is a very characteristic signature of the Luttinger liquid of 1D systems, because imagine that I have a 1D system with two edges, left and right movers. And let's write a dispersion relation like this. Maybe not that symmetrical. I have field levels, many field levels. And the Fermi level gives me 2 plus Kf and minus Kf. Okay? So this is energy. So this is not quantum Rho. It's 1D fermions. Let's make low energy excitations. Same stuff, but going on both sides now. There will be, of course, something new, since now you have two edges, is that at some point I can take an electron from one side and put it on the other side. It costs me a lot of momentum, 2 kF, but a negligible energy. Okay? So which means that at some point these guys will not be the lowest possible energy. It will become better to cross completely the Fermi sea and go from one side to the other. But that's exactly what we see here. Spanning from 0, you see that there are the left and right moving simple particle Hall excitations. But if K is large enough, then the energy goes down because you are just transferring one particle across the Fermi surface. Then transferring two particles, three particles, and so on. And that's great. It means that
two sides of the sample. Between two sides.
absolutely,
of
in the
sample.
case of the quantum world, it's across the two sides of the sample. Absolutely,
Exactly.
absolutely.
What determines the 2K? In your picture, the black hole, 2K determines the clear arch as well.
Yes.
But what determines 2K in this picture? Because we are dealing with two different, completely separated
You have occupied orbitals, and the occupied orbitals are classified by a momentum value. So it's the number of electrons that determines also the K values, exactly like KF in an electronic system. So in this point, it's no different from usual 1D physics.
So the 2kF will grow with the length of the cylinder.
Absolutely, with the length of the droplet. Absolutely. So one edge, the other edge, and the particles that are crossing the droplet. Okay, let's make close-up on these points. Okay, that's the close-up. So this is the total momentum, and these are the energy of those excited states. On top of, let's say, no transfer of electrons, you find that you can make particle excitations on the left side and particle excitation on the right side of the droplet, okay? And then, starting from the second excited level, of course, you can make an excitation on each side, okay? Then, of course, it's more and more complex as you grow, so it fills all the possible values of the momentum. So it means that you have some tower of state structure of the excited states, and it repeats itself each time an electron is crossing the whole sample. So starting from 2kF, you have exactly the same excitation structure, which is simply the particle Hall excitations, which I can capture by a bosonic description.
But in this case, you don't take into account any scattering from the electron. Yeah, because if you have the scattering on the way of transfer, he will never come to another side.
It's free electron picture. Absolutely. It's free electron picture in this case. Counting the number of states. Simply. Okay, fine. So that's the case of the Laughlin state. Okay. So we see that there is a structure which is fully compatible with the bosonic description of the H-ball. So then the question is, so it means that it's also coherent with the Moore-Reed idea that you can use a CFT to construct the bulk wave function. Because if you construct the bulk wave function with a simple boson, then it means that very likely, if you believe in the bulk H correspondence, the H mode should be described by a simple boson theory. And it works. That's the case. So let's look at the Pfaffian. We have the bulk Pfaffian obtained by a CFT, boson times Majorana. So we should be able to discover at the edge of the system a boson and a Majorana. Let's do this. So we redo the same kind of calculation. We put a droplet. Oops. Okay. We put a droplet of bosons. In this case, it will be bosons. And we use the three-body contact interaction, which we know is in the universality class of the Pfaffian. The ground state is the Pfaffian state. And we look at the edge mode excitations in this case. So that's for an even number of particles, even number of bosons. That's the same. So if I look at the low resolution of the spectrum, I find in fact a picture which is exactly like this. There is a gap somewhere, and then there is a lot of excited states. So now I'm looking at the fine structure at the lower part of the edge mode. Okay. So if I do this, I find that there is a difference between odd and even number of particles, which is nice because this Pfaffian has a look of pairing. So pairing means that even and odd should not be the same, and that's the case. It's not the same. So that's an even number of particles. So close to zero, we see that it looks like usual particle Hall excitations, at least for these three guys. But then all these towers, they are not the same. And there is an alternation. You need to go 2 steps to find again the same tower of states. Okay, you see that this is similar to this, but this is different. The degeneracy is not the same. That's for an even number of particles. And then now, if you look at an odd number of particles, you discover something very different. Right at zero momentum, so no particles across the droplet, you see that it's not the same as before. There is a missing state right in the middle. There is also the fact that you need a 4kF excitation to go back to the same central tower of states. But then there is an amusing twofold almost degeneracy at 2kF. And this picture repeats itself, and so on. Can we understand this? And the reason is yes, and we can understand this by a CFT construction. In this CFT stuff, there is a whole story going on, which I will summarize with only a few words. In CFT, we have a symmetry group, the conformal group, which is of course infinite, but even its algebra, its Lie algebra is infinite, and it's spanned by generators, which are the so-called Virasoro generators, and the representation theory of this algebra is known in detail, and in fact, we know how to compute the degeneracy of the states, provided we know the algebra of these generators. In the case of the CFT that we know that is used for the construction of the Moore-Reed-Pfaffian, we know that the CFT is just one boson and one Majorana. If we look at just one boson, then we know the number of excitations that can be constructed. And this is the lowest part of the tower that you see here. So that's zero momentum. This is the energy of the excited states. And these three guys would be exactly those that you obtain by using bosons propagating in 2 directions. Here you create one left moving boson, then one right moving boson. And then you have the linear combination. But this does not exhaust what we find in the true spectrum of the 3-body guy. The 3-body guy has more states. And in fact, there is a way from the algebra to obtain the degeneracy of these states. And so it means that you have to consider the bosonic theory plus the energy eigenstate you would obtain in the Ising model, because the Ising model it's in the universality class of the Majorana fermion CFT. So in fact, you should recover in the H spectrum the product of the degeneracies coming from the boson theory and from the Ising model theory. And that's exactly what we observe. That's exactly what we observe in the case of the even number of particles. The number, so this is observed for a realistic value of the radius of the cylinder, and these counting are obtained by going to this tau-taulus limit, in which the Hamiltonian simplifies a lot, and where we can compute more states and obtain more degeneracies more clearly. If we believe that nothing happens in between, then we can count the states, and we find that they are exactly described as the degeneracy predicted by the theory of one boson times one Majorana fermion. So in this case, it's due to just one boson and the energy operator of the Ising model. It gives the degeneracy which are written in numbers, and you can see the dots that are close to this number, and it matches. So so there are more states than predicted by the simple boson theory. As I showed you, in the even number of particles, nevertheless, there are two types of towers. This guy, which is described by this, so boson plus energy operator plus identity for the, strictly speaking, the identity operator for the Ising fermions. And then there is another tower of state in which you see that there is a missing state right in the middle, and the degeneracy is 2 on each side. And the reason, oops, going in the wrong direction. And then this is due to the appearance of the spin operator of the Ising model. After all, the Ising model is describing spins, so there should be a spin operator in the formulation. And if you act with the spin operator in addition to the boson, then you can construct states, and their degeneracy are those, and they look close, eventually adiabatically related to those of the three-body model. Now, if you look at the odd number of particles, that's even more interesting, because then we find that this is the smoking gun for the appearance of the Majorana state. And the fact that you have a Majorana fermions, that's the counting from the boson plus one Majorana fermion. It leads to the quite obvious fact that there is an almost twofold degeneracy close to the corresponding 2kF value when you have an odd number of particles. So it means that this twofold degeneracy, which you observe here, okay? So that's the diagonalization of the three-body bosonic Hamiltonian, which we believe should have an edge theory described by one boson and one Majorana fermion. That's the case. We see there is evidence for the presence of this Majorana fermion at the edge. So which means that this is direct evidence that this special Hamiltonian, this three-body contact interaction, so which may or may not adiabatically related to some physical model, it has indeed the correct edge mode as predicted by this bulk boundary correspondence. This is not built in. What is built in is simply the fact that we use a CFT, we construct the ground state wave function with it. There is no guarantee that there is an operator whose ground state is this wave function. We were able to construct it, and we were able to check that the edge modes of this theory are in agreement with the CFT prediction. So it remains to be seen, and it's not yet settled at the present time, whether the Coulomb interaction in the n=1 Landau level has to do with this Pfaffian state. That's a tricky story, which is still going on, and we will see in the future if what happens. Just let me mention that so far, what has been observed in real samples in which you have this 5 half state is not in complete agreement with any of the. There is no agreement with any of the proposed candidates from the theory side. Okay, thank you.
Okay, you taught us the basis, the very basis of the integer quantum Paul transferred somehow to non-integer cases is the presence of the gap in the bulk and
yes.
No gap in the
yes.
cases. How the statements are transferred or expressed in this picture of CFT, in the picture of Majorana plus bosons? Where are gaps in the bulk in this case? And
so in this case, you have to believe that for this special Hamiltonian, there is a gap in the bulk, which you have to check. It's
And-
not built in.
And this gap somehow is beyond CFT, yes? This gap state, bulk state.
Absolutely,
somehow.
absolutely.
Uh-huh.
The gap
So-
belongs to the Hamiltonian.
So
The
this-
CFT doesn't tell you anything about the
Okay,
Hamiltonian.
It doesn't explain why there is a gap. Just a kind
No.
of the fact that you take effect of the gapless.
It doesn't explain the presence of the gap, no. But concerning the edge modes, then the situation is quite simple because you can see that this Majorana, it doesn't carry charge. So it's the boson that will carry the charge. So we expect that the explanation for the quantized conductance, it's exactly the same as the 1/3 state. You have one boson that carries the charge at the edge, and that's it.
Is it charged like similar to mode which is carried in the monogalation liquid by, say, phase gradient? Or
Absolutely, yes, it's exactly the same, absolutely. I just described this edge mode from the point of view of excited states. So I've not written anything like current, but you, of course, can write the
Actually,
current
you
as
can
the
describe
gradient of
in
the
terms
phase.
of this elementary excitation.
Yes.
It reminds very much the very original construction by Tomonaga when he introduced bosonization. Well before Lazarus, right?
Yes, yes,
But
yes,
Tomonaga.
right, yes, yes.
You said it, but I don't see where it comes from. How do we see that the fermion, the Majorana fermion has no charge here?
You don't see it in
Ah,
what I
okay.
said, no?
By definition, my Arab fermion has no charge. Yes. No.
Normally, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
In the field theory, it's clear, it's neutral, because it's self-conjugate. So it's plausible that it carries no charge, at least plausible.
And somehow this factorization of Majorana fermions and the boson modes, and in other way the interpretation of other Pfaffian states as a general state, fractional Coulomb state as particles with tubes. Is there some maybe one dualism Majorana bosons? Yes. Another one electron coupled with the flux tube. Can it happen that there is some relation
So
between
I
these
have
two?
some comments to say about that. There is one thing which I have not described, is that you can really think about this Pfaffian state as a paired state of composite fermions. So that was an idea that was put forward in a paper by Reed and Green, with a lot of details. So that's a way in which you can understand that to get the Pfaffian state, you just need to add pairing on top of the composite fermion IDs, which means that at filling factor 1/2, normally you have a Fermi C of these composite fermions. Okay? In the lowest Landau level, there is no pairing interaction, while in the n=1 Landau level, you slightly change the interaction, and then you induce pairing between these guys. So, which is a nice idea.
Because of oscillating function.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.